There's a number you've probably heard, $1.46 million. That's what Americans now say they need to retire comfortably. Here's the part nobody puts next to it. The Federal Reserve runs a survey of what households actually hold. In its late 50s and early 60s, the typical American household has about $185,000 saved. That's not a gap. That's a different planet. So somewhere out there is a 58-year-old who has done everything they were told to do. Paid the mortgage down, put money in the 401k in the years they could. And they've just been handed a target 8 times bigger than the balance on their statement. The obvious conclusion is that this country is sleepwalking into a disaster. That's the story most of the internet is telling right now. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's wrong. But I went looking for where that 1.46 million actually comes from. What I found underneath it changed how I read every retirement headline since, because the scariest number in this whole conversation isn't the one you're missing. It's the one nobody is measuring properly. By the end of this, you'll know exactly where the big number was born and why it climbs every single year. You'll also know what happened when 2 government researchers checked the retirement crisis against people's real tax returns. What they found is not what the surveys say. Let's start with what people really have. The Federal Reserve runs something called the Survey of Consumer Finances. It's the closest thing this country has to an honest photograph of household money, and it gets picked apart by everyone from Kiplinger to NerdWallet. Here's what it shows. Median retirement savings for households aged 55 to 64 is $185,000. For 65 to 74, it's $200,000. For 75 and older, it drops to $130,000. Now switch from the median to the average and the picture flips completely. The average for 65 to 74 is $609,000. Guardian reported both of those figures side by side, and the distance between them is the whole story. When the average is 3 times the median, you aren't looking at a typical household anymore. You're looking at a handful of very large balances dragging the line upward. NerdWallet put the same data another way. Across all families, the average is $333,000 and the median is $87,000. And out of households that have a retirement account at all, only 5% have $1 million or more. 5%. That's the real population of the $1 million retirement. So the target isn't slightly out of reach for most people. It was never in the same neighborhood. Which raises the obvious question. Where did 1.46 million come from in the first place? It comes from Northwestern Mutual, specifically their 2026 Planning and Progress Study, published on the 1st of April this year. And here's the detail that gets stripped off every time that number gets reposted. It isn't a calculation. Nobody modeled a retirement and arrived at it. It's a survey. They ask Americans what they believe they'll need, and 1.46 million is the answer people gave. That is a completely different kind of number. It also moves fast. Northwestern Mutual reports it's up $200,000 from last year alone. That's a jump of more than 15% in 12 months, and it has climbed more than 50% since 2020. Inflation over that stretch was real, but it was nowhere near 50%. So the number isn't tracking prices. Northwestern Mutual's own explanation is that it reflects a convergence of factors. Persistent inflation, longer life expectancies, and uncertainty about the future. Uncertainty is one of the inputs, which means the magic number isn't really a measurement of retirement at all. It's a measurement of how worried people are about retirement, and it has been rising because the worry has. That's the first thing worth knowing. The second one is bigger. Every alarming retirement statistic you have ever read sits on the same foundation. A household survey. Someone from the government calls or mails a form and asks people what they live on. In 2017, 2 researchers at the Census Bureau, Adam B. and Joshua Mitchell, decided to check that. Their paper is called "Do Older Americans Have More Income Than We Think?" What they did was simple and slightly ruthless. They took the survey answers and they matched them against those same people's actual IRS tax filings and Social Security records. The survey was wrong, and not by a rounding error. B and Mitchell found the median income of older Americans was about 30% higher in the tax records than in the survey. 30%. They also found the specific reason. Retirees were failing to report their 401k and IRA withdrawals about 46% of the time, close to half. That isn't people lying. Think about what's actually being asked. A pension check arrives every month with a stub attached, so of course you remember it. But money you moved out of an IRA once, back in March, to fix a roof? Most people don't file that under income when a stranger asks what they live on. The Social Security Administration ran the same check in its own working paper and found the underreporting was just as prevalent years later. It never got fixed, so the picture is off. It's off in one direction systematically, and the entire retirement crisis conversation is standing on top of it. Here's what that does to a statistic you've definitely heard. Some version of this gets quoted constantly. Around 40% of seniors live on Social Security alone. Saving Advice ran it in May of this year at 39%. Now take the same population and measure it with tax records instead of survey answers. Census researchers find that about 14% of Americans 65 and older rely on Social Security for 90% or more of their income. Bolden, reading the same body of work, puts it at 12% of men and 15% of women. 14 against 39. Same country, same year, two different measuring instruments. I want to be honest about what that does and doesn't mean. 14% of Americans over 65 is still millions of people living almost entirely on one check. Nobody is claiming that group doesn't exist. But the figure that gets repeated is nearly 3 times the figure that shows up in tax data. Once you've seen that, the next scary headline reads differently. There's one economist who has built most of a career on exactly this point. Andrew Biggs is at the American Enterprise Institute, and before that he was Principal Deputy Commissioner of the Social Security Administration. So he is not a stranger to this data. His book came out in March called The Real Retirement Crisis. His earlier papers don't leave much doubt about where he stands. One of them is titled America's Retirement Crisis. The Emperor Has No Clothes. His argument runs roughly like this. The better academic research, he says, concludes that only about a quarter of Americans are undersaving for retirement. And that group falls short of the optimal amount by 15 to 20%, not by everything, by 15 to 20%. He makes a second point I keep coming back to. When you ask retirees how they're doing, most of them say they're doing fine. The usual reaction is that they must be in denial. Biggs argues the opposite. He says they report doing well because, as best anyone can measure it, they are. That's the case for the defense. It's a real one, made by a serious person, and it is not the version that shows up in your feed. Now here's the other side, because it deserves the same airtime. None of that means people feel okay. Every year, the Employee Benefit Research Institute runs the Retirement Confidence Survey together with Greenwald Research. It's the longest running survey of its kind, and this year they polled just over 2,500 people. The 2026 results came out in April. 64% of Americans said they feel confident they'll have enough money to live comfortably throughout retirement. That is down from last year. PlanAdvisor, covering the release, put it more bluntly. Worker and retiree confidence has hit its lowest point in nearly a decade. The reasons EBRI names are rising costs and growing worry about the future of Social Security and Medicare. And there's a detail buried in there that I find quietly telling. 88% of workers who are offered a retirement plan say they're satisfied with that plan. But EBRI's own reading is that satisfaction with the plan does not translate into confidence about the savings. People like the account. They don't trust the outcome. So both things are true at the same time. The measured picture is better than the headlines suggest. The felt picture is the worst it has been in 10 years. Any version of this story that gives you only one of those is selling you something. Which leaves the practical question. What is an ordinary American retirement actually funded by? Mostly by a check that people underestimate. The Social Security Administration says the average monthly benefit for a retired worker was $2,071 in January of this year. By May, the SSA's own monthly snapshot had it at $2,083. CNBC rounded that off to just under $25,000 a year. For a couple where both people draw somewhere near the average, that's approaching $50,000 a year before a single dollar comes out of savings. And Social Security publishes its own rule of thumb. In its Understanding the Benefits booklet, it says most people need somewhere around 70 to 80% of their pre-retirement income from every source combined. Put those two facts next to each other and something clicks. $185,000 behaves very differently in a real life than it does in a headline. It was never meant to be the whole retirement. It's the part that sits on top of the check. That is exactly what the big number leaves out. 1.46 million is a savings target, quoted as though savings were the only thing paying the bills. So here's where all of this lands. The number nobody hits was never a measurement of what a retirement costs. It's a survey of what people fear it costs, and it climbs every year because the fear does. Underneath it, the data everyone argues about is gathered by asking people to remember their own withdrawals. B and Mitchell showed at the Census Bureau that they get it wrong nearly half the time. Andrew Biggs reads that and concludes the crisis is overstated. Eberei reads the same year and reports confidence at a 10-year low. Both of those are on the record and they do not resolve. What I keep coming back to is a comment I read under a retirement video last week. Someone was watching an advisor explain how to spend down a portfolio. They wrote that his clients must be high-end, because the rest of us have tiny 401ks that get wiped out by a new roof. That person isn't confused about the math. They're pointing out that almost nobody in this conversation is talking to them. So, if you're somewhere in that middle, I'd genuinely like to know, which number have you been measuring yourself against, and where did you first hear it? Tell me in the comments.